Ron DeSantis has to go through Trump if he's going to become the nominee. That's obvious. So what is his actual argument as to why Republicans should reject Donald Trump and go with him? Well, he likes to make the case that in a general election, he's more electable. Take a look at this.
So I think you want to have somebody who can draw people in who may not have traditionally been Republicans and are willing to give us a shot. I think a lot of people realize that Biden is a failure, but I think they're looking for a vehicle that they'll be comfortable getting behind. And I think I could coalesce a pretty good number of people to be able to do that. I do believe that there's a limit to the number of voters that would consider the former president at this point.
Look, I think it makes sense for Ron DeSantis to point out that Donald Trump obviously has a ceiling. The ceiling is, I think, way too high for any reasonable person to be comfortable with the state of our country, that many people believe this crazy stuff. But he did worse in 2020 than he did in 2016. It doesn't seem like he's going to be able to expand his reach much beyond that. So it makes sense for a candidate who aims to take down Trump to really focus on that. The issue is whether Ron DeSantis is the guy that can make that case. This is a guy who is doing everything he can to go more crazy on the culture war stuff. He's talking about bringing in people who've never traditionally considered themselves to be Republicans. So he thinks that, I guess, who he's going to get is people who have no thoughts whatsoever about politics, no ideology, but have been convinced by Fox News, which they don't watch because they don't watch politics, to despise trans people. Or maybe they just hate Disney. I don't know exactly how he expects that he's the guy who's gonna bring them in when he has totally rejected his prior pitch of himself as a more moderate Democrat or a Republican and has now gone full bore crazy on culture stuff.
Yeah, but he's got to thread a needle. So, John, I still think he's actually doing the right strategy, but I think there's a giant problem with the strategy. So the strategy is go populist. That's why he's saying that he might pardon Trump and some of the January 6th guys, and he hates woke, etc. There's no way to win a Republican primary if you do not do that, okay? So, but at the same time, he's got to make an argument for why it should be him rather than Trump, because they're the two main people on the populist slate in the primary. And so he's got to make the argument that he's more electable, which is true, by the way. And why is it true? Well, there's two reasons. One is a substance. That Trump is a lunatic who didn't want to leave office after he lost. To me, that's worse than anything related to DeSantis or any other person who has ever run for office in American history. I mean, that ends our democracy. That's not an open question. He's the worst, period, full stop. And secondarily, guys, the way that the media treats DeSantis is very different than the way the media treats Trump. So when Trump does something bad, the media does something rare with politicians, they actually point it out. Normally they cover for politicians and give them tremendous positive press for no reason other than to suck up the power. But Trump is outside of that rule now. So when DeSantis goes into the general election, we all know the facts. So we will know that he's actually very similar to Trump when it comes to the populist rhetoric and policies outside of destroying democracy, right? But that's not how the media will portray it. The media will portray him as far more moderate than Trump. And he has all the donors in the world, and media is obsessed with donors. So they will give him kid gloves treatment. They will not call him a liar. They will not, I mean, that's only reserved for Donald Trump and any other outsider. They don't call Bernie Sanders a liar, they just call him every other name in the world, right? So the outsiders get horrible press treatment, but DeSantis is within the tense enough of the establishment that he will get light treatment by the press. So that's why he doesn't have a choice in the primaries. He's got to go populist, and he's got to say he's more electable. That's the only route to win a Republican primary and to defeat Donald Trump. And in the general election, he has to hope that the mainstream media is as corrupt as they have always been, so that they'll call him a moderate or moderate enough, right? And they won't emphasize all the things that he did that were, in our opinion, barbaric in Florida, right? But they won't. The press won't want to say that because they won't want to offend Republican voters. So they'll treat him much more pleasantly. Then he's got a chance at winning the general election as well. So as much as I dislike DeSantis, I think he has the correct political strategy. The only problem with DeSantis' strategy is DeSantis. Like, he as a candidate seems to suck, right? Do you see what I'm saying? The strategy is correct, but they put in the wrong widget. And the widget is not very charismatic, and everybody knows it. And in fact, there was a giant Politico piece recently about how there was a bunch of pieces, one about how his wife actually runs everything, and part of the reason they have her running things, especially in public, is because she's considered likable and he's considered unlikable. We saw the other leak where his advisors told him, if you're going into a debate, remember to write likable on your piece of paper because people don't like you. So you have to try to appear to be likable. So the only problem with Ron DeSantis' strategy is Ron DeSantis.
I think DeSantis needs to understand that, yeah, he's got the populist thing. You're absolutely right about that. But he'd better hope that none of these other Republicans he's running against, Trump included, bring up the fact that, yes, he's been the leader of the culture wars. Yes, he's done horrid things to our state here in Florida. But it's kind of like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Because every horrible thing Ron DeSantis does end up somehow backfiring on him. And I'm not just talking about the Disney thing. I know we all know how he has really just put himself in a corner with that. But I'm talking about the book bans that are taking place in Florida. Okay, well, what's happening now? Now he's getting sued. Most of his policies have gotten him sued. We are experiencing a massive influx in litigation against our governor here. He just passed a 6-week abortion ban in the state of Florida. We know from the midterms, we know from red state ballot initiatives that even Republican voters, when it's put on that ballot, they don't like that. They're not happy with it. And women, obviously, especially, are not going to reward him with their votes for this. So yes, DeSantis does have a long list of accomplishments, but they're not real accomplishments. They're not things that he can go out there and tout, because any one of his opponents can bring up, wait a minute, that's just the first part of the story. Why don't you tell everybody what happened next? A smart opponent, whether it's in the Republican primary or in the full-blown presidential race, can absolutely put him through the ringer by reminding the public what happened next, because that's the part of the story, especially down here in Florida. Most of these folks don't pay attention until, well, they only pay attention to when it happens. They don't pay attention to the aftermath, and that's where DeSantis's record completely falls apart.
Whatever his best strategy is, I still think has almost no chance of actually succeeding. What he has to do to get through Trump poisons him every time he does it with the Trump base. I think the path is just too narrow, and he's not adept enough a politician to manage it. It is so much easier to fake own the libs in a way that doesn't even own the libs. It's just harmful than it is to take down a politician like Donald Trump. I don't think he has it in him.
Yeah, and I want to build off what Cenk said, because he's absolutely right here. 4 or 5 months ago, DeSantis in some polls was beating Donald Trump. He was beating him in Iowa polls. He was beating him in a couple New Hampshire polls. So what happened in the last 5 months? It's not because Trump just started attacking him. It's because DeSantis went out there and had to interact with human beings. DeSantis did his little world tour, and what we get from that? We got a bunch of memes, we got a bunch of goofy videos. We had videos from last week where he's wiping his nose and then rubbing it on a supporter's shirt. This man cannot interact with human beings, and that is going to tank him in those early primary and caucus states. And we've already seen what it's done to his poll numbers. The guy should have, done the strike while the iron was hot, but he didn't. He waited till his poll numbers were, kind of going down, approaching Nikki Haley numbers.
Yeah.
And the whole reason for that is the book tour, the trips to Iowa. People finally got to meet him, and they were like, oh, yeah, I'm not good with whatever this is. And that's his big problem.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.